Stephen King is the Global Chief Economist from HSBC. Good evening, Stephen.
Evening.
All right, where do you stand on this great debate of is there too much austerity all at once in the system, or should there be more growth?
I think we should have some more prudence over the course of the next couple of years. The main problem is that debt levels are far too high in the Western world. We've been living beyond our means for a number of years. The good news about the stimulus over the last couple of years, it avoided the worst possible outcome, which is a Great Depression Mark II. But you shouldn't jump from that to assume you can have a rebound to growth in the normal way over the course of the years ahead.
Your latest global forecast, global economic review, I mean, in the one sense, you don't see double dip.
No, we see actually a kind of
strongest, relatively global strong growth, but it's so disparate between emerging markets and advanced economies.
That's absolutely right. The emerging nations are doing pretty well. There's some worries about China slowing down, but the truth of the matter is that the emerging nations have not got the debts that the developed nations now have. In fact, they've almost had a role reversal over the course of the last few years. In the old days, we used to think of the emerging nations having all the debt and the developed nations not having so, gone exactly in the reverse.
Are we in danger, though? If we just have 2 or 3 years of subpar or just par growth, what's so wrong with that?
Well, the answer in one sense is not too much, because if we've avoided the Great Depression Mark II, that's extremely good news. The big challenge...
You don't look very cheerful at the prospect.
Well, no, I'm not too cheerful, but the truth of the matter is if you borrow too much, you have to go through a period of austerity. And in one sense, if you don't do this and continue to rely on continuous increases in budget deficits, you end up with a Japan-type situation, that increasingly the economy becomes socialised, without any kind of private sector risk-taking at all, and you end up with large budget deficits and continued stagnation.
We constantly hear this reference to Japan, which, of course, the way they handled their debt crisis, and then ended up with a lost decade.
Yes.
How realistic is that?
Well, in one sense, we're worse off than Japan. Japan's economic losses in the first 2 or 3 years of its crisis were actually much more modest than what we've seen in the Western world. Moreover, Japan didn't really stimulate its economy in the way that we have done in the West. So actually, we've had a huge amount of stimulus and not much in the way of a result.
Of all the advanced economies, which is giving you most concern at the moment?
Oddly enough, I would say it's probably the US and the UK, because at least in the Eurozone has been an attempt to try and deal with these excessive budget deficits. In one sense, it's a dress rehearsal for a bigger global problem, which is that the US has borrowed far too much and will have to grapple with its own austerity in the next 2 or 3 years, and we haven't even got to that political debate at this stage.
The MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee, which of course is in the UK, and the ECB, they both say inflation is not a worry at the moment, and to a certain extent they're right when you've got such low levels of growth. But do you fear that there will be a bubble of inflation that will roar forward once growth picks up? Or am I just being naive to the point of...
Well, there are some concerns about inflation in certain parts of the world. The emerging nations have done pretty well. They've rebounded and possibly might get some more inflation there. But the truth of the matter is that in the Western world, low bond yields, very, very weak money supply growth, lots of deflationary pressures currently, lots of austerity. Chances of inflation coming back any time soon, I would say, are very, very low indeed.
In other words, Quest, you're talking rubbish, but you're far too polite to put it in such blunt terms. You know how this thing works, the traffic lights. If we take your global review, your global economy,
yes,
that you've just published, and give it a red. Not mark your own work. I mean, for the global economy, red, amber or green?
Red, presumably, is a very worrying double-dip kind of story.
Very worrying, and let's all go home and tell
I would say it's amber at this stage. It's not completely disastrous.
All right, well, thank you. We'll give you an amber. Stephen D. King, just to make clear, your latest book is Losing Control, The Emerging Threats to Western Prosperity.
That's right.
Many thanks indeed.
Thank you very much.